Good afternoon. My name is Kathy Seidel. I'm delighted to be here with you today as part of the Albuquerque Historical Society's monthly lecture series. To tell you a little bit about myself first, I received a master's degree in library and information science from the University of Illinois, Urbana-Champaign in 1991. I have worked as a school librarian at the John F. Kennedy Schule in Berlin, Germany, as an academic librarian at Baton Rouge Community College in Baton Rouge, Louisiana, and as a public librarian here in Albuquerque at the Special Collections Library. I retired last fall as the branch manager of the Special Collections Library, and I'm now enjoying my free time to do some of my own research and reading about New Mexico history. So I am going to share my screen and we'll get started. I hope you all can see it now. We're going to talk today about the 10 Dons, and my title is The 10 Dons Plus One. So today I'm going to tell you the story of an artifact, a group of men, and an unexpected character. Our story begins with Shauna Morris, one of the staff at the Special Collections Library. While she was researching clubs in Albuquerque for a patron, she came across this wonderful artifact that you see on the left in the stacks. It's about 5 inches by 7 inches and bound in soft leather. Our copy is housed in a thin box along with the letters, the donation information that accompanied it. The donation was made by a Mr. Frank Moore. He was then in Lubbock, Texas in 1964. He had apparently been one of the founding members of this club, and he was very happy to share this treasure with the library. On the screen, you see pictured the front cover and the first page of our library copy. So we have this really buttery, soft leather cover, and inside this beautiful ornate script describing a paper. And then there's the title, Evolution of the Human Mind. I was so curious about this. In fact, we all were. We needed to know more about the 10 Dons. Turn another page, and we see this menu on the left. And a little further in the booklet, the menu on the right. So what was this club? We can see from the menu, the first one on the left, that our Mr. Moore was somehow featured. It says second meeting with Mr. Frank H. Moore. And for dinner, they had individual chicken pies and a number of side dishes. I'd like to take just a second here to point out a couple of things about the booklet. Through research, I've learned that this beautiful ornate booklet was prepared, one for each member of the group, by E.A. Hickey, who is the sister of Judge Hickey. And another note, this discolored oval that you see on the left-hand page was made by a photo that was on the opposite page. So this shows you why archivists usually store photos separately. So then let's look at the menu on the right. We can see that they really ate very well. It's quite an extensive menu. In this case, they seem to have had an abundance of sweets after dinner. First, they started with a candy shower. And then after dinner, there was raspberry shrub, prune whip, cake, peppermint squares, orange straws, and confetti benediction. So curiosity piqued, what was the 10 Dons? The 10 Dons was a social and literary club that started in 1904 with 10 members. Through our research, we find that there were only ever 10 members at a time. It was a men's club. They took their name from the Spanish honorific Don. The stated purpose of the club was to provide opportunity for social recreation and mutual mental development. In the beginning, meetings were held twice per month during the school year at one of the members' homes. At each meeting, a sumptuous dinner was provided by the host, and a different member would present a lecture. And we'll see later that the topics of these lectures were not easy subjects. They required quite a bit of research and preparation. The description that I have here on the slide from Earl Moulton's 50th anniversary history of the club gives us a good picture of the membership throughout the club's lifetime. He said, the club history would provide the story of quite a large number of men coming and going, living and dying during the past 50 years, who have occupied a rather unique state in the social and cultural life of Albuquerque. Throughout the years, the membership had included many jurists, professors, physicians, educators, including 2 university presidents, merchants, and in recent years, scientists. The 10 Dons as a club famously had no bylaws, no dues, or any regulations of any kind. The only formality in its structure was the appointing of a program committee consisting of 2 members who were tasked with assigning the lectures for the coming year. One member snarkily declared that the program committee was composed of the last 2 members to reach the downtown office where the meeting was being held to select the committee. This poem that I hope you can see now, was written in 1907 by C.E. Hodgin and illustrates both the creativity of the Dons and the structure of the club. He titled it Incongruities, or the Dons Embalmed. And it is very long, much longer than what you see here. But I would like to quote the first few stanzas. So, in a Western town of some renown, where climate's in its glory, there is a club which they do dub the 10 Dons, young in story. A more harmonious group of 10 could scarce be found where there are men. And now it's up to me this time to embalm these Dons in congruous rhyme. I think it will not be amiss to say there is no club like this. In peace the 10 Dons take such pride, no rules and regulations guide. No constitution here to sign, no gag rule goes, no chance to whine. No flaunting bylaws fore nor aft, no starved officials, hence no graft. No dues, no fines, no fattening fund, nobody here is ever done. No fuss ensues, no fits of blues resulting from our different views. But one thing holds that I now note, no motion goes save a solid vote. These things are facts, no passing dream, incongruous though they all may seem. It then goes on for many pages describing some of the Dons. Over the 63 years of its existence, there were approximately 41 gentlemen who were members. The average length of membership was 24.5 years. And I find that really remarkable personally, given the requirement to produce a significant lecture twice per year. This club really piqued my curiosity. Fortunately, in addition to our artifact and the history that was provided by Earl Moulton, there is a 10 Dons archival collection at the Center for Southwest Research. And the club also featured frequently on the society page of the Albuquerque Journal. There was plenty of material to find out more about the 10 Dons. I'd like to take a look now at some of the founding members. There are quite a few names I think you'll see that are familiar to local historians. I've listed them here in no particular order. First, we'll start with Charles E. Hodgin, who was most frequently referred to as C.E. Hodgin. And it seems you'll find that most of these gentlemen went by their initials in the beginning. Dean Hodgin was a member of the 10 Dons from 1904 to 1934, the time of his death. He came to Albuquerque in 1891 to be the superintendent of schools. He was vice president of UNM from 1917 to 1925. Hodgin Hall is named for him. The topic of his first lecture for the Dons was ethics. Next, Mayo Ellsworth Hickey, known as M.E. Hickey, was a member of the 10 Dons from 1904 to 1936, also the year of his death. He became the superintendent of public schools in 1899 and later became a district court judge. During his tenure as judge, he established the first juvenile court for New Mexico. It is said that Judge Hickey organized the 10 Dons and held the first meeting in his home. His first paper was Evolution of the Human Mind. Then we have Alonzo Bertrand MacMillan, and guess what? He went by AB, was a member of the 10 Dons from 1904 to 1927. He was a lawyer and became counsel for the Albuquerque National Bank. His first paper was titled Uses and Abuses of Organized Capital and Labor. Frank H. Moore, who donated the artifact that's the main character of our story, was a member for just a very short time. In 1905, 1 year after the club was founded, he moved to Kansas City, where he eventually became the general counsel for the Kansas City Southern Lines. Imagine the impact that this club had on him, that he remembered it so fondly 60 years later. His first talk was a daring one to present in front of 2 former school superintendents. Can education be made more practical? And if so, is it desirable? Andrew B Stroup also went by AB. He was a member from 1904 until 1922 when he moved to California. He was the superintendent of public schools. Are you sensing the theme here? His first talk was the influence of poetry on thought and action. AB also worked with prohibition forces briefly here in Albuquerque and then quite extensively in California. And as a librarian, I need to add that Mrs. A.B. Stroup was appointed New Mexico State Director for the Books for Everybody program from the American Library Association. She was also, for a short time, the New Mexico representative to the American Suffrage Association. Next, we have Edward Buxton Christie, EB, of course, and he was a member from 1904 to 1934, also the time of his death. E.B. Christie was quite a famous architect here in Albuquerque. He is credited with the redesign of Hodgen Hall to Pueblo style in 1908. It wasn't Hodgen Hall at that time, but what a small world Albuquerque was. E.B.'s first talk was titled Hero Worship. Okay, Dr. J.H. Roth was a member from 1904 to 1922 when he left the club due to ill health. He was an esteemed Albuquerque physician. His first talk was about sewage, a topic relevant to public health. H.E. Fox was a member for just 1 year before he moved away. But then he came back to Albuquerque a couple of years later and took the very next open spot. Mr. Fox was a jeweler whose first talk was Our Personal Responsibility for Conditions as They Exist. Rupert F. Asplund, RF, was also a member for just over a year. He left the club when he moved to Santa Fe to take a job at the Treasury. He would eventually become the director of the New Mexico Taxpayers Association, and his first talk was on the Russo-Japan War pro-Russia. And last but not least, we have Dr. Guy Harlan Fitzgerald, GH, who was a member for the first year. Frank Moore, in his donation letter to the library, says that Dr. Fitzgerald moved to Mexico for a time, but I have not been able to confirm that. He was the Bernalillo County Public Health Officer and then practiced medicine in Arizona from 1914 on. His talk for the 10 Dons was titled Popular Fallacies Regarding Contagious Diseases. So there we have our 10 founding members. Many of them did seem to move in the same circles professionally. There was a bit of turnover in the membership in the first few years, but after that, the membership was very stable. Remember that the average term for a member was over 24 years. The 10 Dons were frequently in the newspapers during their early years. And I'm going to share a number of articles with you here, but you don't have to try to read them on the blurry screen captures from the old newspapers. I'll be letting you know what's said. In the 1900s and 1910s, you could find out what the 10 Dons were up to with announcements of their upcoming meetings and reports afterwards of what featured at their dinner, and who was in attendance and what the lecture was about. The article on the right was the first report that I was able to find. It appeared on November 13th, 1904, under the heading of the week in the university. Often the club in the early years would appear in both the society page and the university news. This article tells us that Mrs. Hodgin at the Mesa home on Tuesday night entertained the gentlemen's club known as the 10 Dons. The service was made very pleasant by the assistance of 4 young ladies from the dormitory. Dr. Roth read a paper on city sewage, which was followed by general discussion. The 10 Dons are Doctors Roth and Fitzgerald, attorneys Hickey and MacMillan, Misters Fox, Christie, and Frank Moore, Superintendents Stroup and Hodgin, and Professors Asplund and Hodgin of the university faculty. It's difficult to determine the final meeting of the 10 Dons as they weren't being covered in the newspaper regularly. According to an article that appeared in 1971, the Dons had not had regular meetings since the death of Hugh Woodward in 1968. I still think that's a tremendous lifespan for a small club. Certainly many larger clubs or social organizations have lasted longer. But remember that the membership in this club came with this heavy intellectual burden. Or maybe I just see it that way because I can't imagine doing it myself. So we will continue with a variety of the press the Dons received in their early years. A search of newspapers.com yielded 511 articles between 1904 and 1970. Certainly some of these were false hits, and sometimes they would be the same article that appeared both in the morning and the evening newspapers. This article from October 1905 gave us a recap of a meeting in the society page of the Morning Journal. Again, there is comment about the dinner, the lecture given, and the gentlemen in attendance. Here we have another entry from 1905. I pulled this article because of the title of the paper that was given at that meeting. The title is, "They Enslave Their Children's Children Who May Compromise with Sin." This was presented by A B Stroup, the county superintendent of schools, and I'm pretty curious about what he might have had to say on this topic. This next article from May 7th, 1910, Albuquerque Morning Journal, also appeared on the society page. We can see that it is rather long this time, as it was covering one of the annual dinners. The annual dinners were really quite the affair to which the wives of the Dons were invited. There was usually some entertainment rather than the standard talk. It's hard to read, but the end of the article says, "The 10 Dons have been famous since their organization for the originality displayed in their entertainments. A complete program of the affair will appear in the social columns of the journal Monday morning." And here I've taken just part of that article that appeared then on Monday morning after this weekend's announcement. Imagine all the column space that was being given to this club. This article in its entirety let us know that the 10 Dons, an exclusive organization composed of prominent men of the city and noted for ingeniously planned entertainments, eclipsed all previous efforts this time. At this event, most of the Dons were enlisted to provide an entertaining toast. They were at the Alvarado for the annual dinner, but at the regular meetings, the wives were required to host the elaborate dinners in their homes. And we'll come back to that later. The 10 Dons were almost exclusively in the newspapers for their meetings, or perhaps later membership is noted in obituaries. But this is one example of a time when the group, as a group, became involved in civic matters. The article that comes with this headline states that the 640-acre tract of land on the mesa east of Albuquerque, given to the city as a park site under a special act of Congress passed 2 years prior on condition of payment of $1.25 per acre by the city, would revert to the public domain and the special act become void if the $840 necessary to secure title were not paid to the government in the immediate future. Apparently, and in this instance, the Dons actually appointed 2 special committees for the purpose of raising funds. Their attention was drawn to this park site by the paper read at their most recent meeting by Dr. Walter G. Hope, which was titled, "The Duty of the Citizen of Albuquerque to the Municipality." Okay, that one issue aside, the news coverage of the 10 Dons rested primarily on the society page. Here we see one of my favorite headlines, "Potato bread served at 10 Dons dinner." The article even included the recipe used by Mrs. Neal B. Field. This seemed to me to be kind of an odd headline in the newspaper, but then we note that this article appeared in 1918, and there were massive food shortages in Europe during World War I. So Americans were conserving foodstuffs such as wheat, meat, sugar, and fats to be sent overseas to starving civilians. And it explains the significance of having potato bread. And if you are interested in the recipe for the potato bread, it was scald 2 cups of white Quaker cornmeal, stir until the meal is like a thick mush, boil 5 large Irish potatoes and save the water in which they are boiled. Use salt and 1 quart of flour, mash potatoes and mix them with mush. Take half of the mixture, add 1 cake of yeast foam dissolved in lukewarm water. Let it stand overnight to form a sponge, add the other half and knead twice. Okay, here I'm showing you this very long article in its entirety, just again to demonstrate the interest that the newspapers felt the public had in the doings of the 10 Dons. And this was the occasion of another annual dinner in March 1915. In this instance, the greatest part of this article relates an amusing anecdote. Several of the Dons here in 1915 apparently drove their automobiles from the Alvarado to the home of Dr. D.R. Boyd after dinner for the rest of the evening's entertainment. A.B. MacMillan showed a daring bit of speed and was caught by a motorcycle policeman. He received a summons to appear in court the following day. And then because the Dons were such a jolly bunch, and this was their annual dinner celebration, when they arrived at Dr. Boyd's house, they decided to hold a mock court to try Mr. MacMillan. M.E. Hickey was appointed the judge, Judge E.A. Mann was district attorney, and A.B. Stroup was the defense attorney. The wives of the Dons were selected as the jury. There was some controversy regarding the jury members because Mrs. MacMillan was unlikely to be impartial, and 4 of the other jurors were passengers in the car. And I find it fascinating that the games of these gentlemen were of such public interest. Indeed, right after this long exposition of their antics, there appears another short article that you'll see at the end on the slide, Dons Dine Again. So in the very same newspaper, there's another short, brief article about them. In this instance, Frank Moore, who had moved to Kansas City, had telegraphed that he would be back in town. So they had another dinner to celebrate him. They really enjoyed their dinners. This is symbolic of another one of their fun meetings. This was from December 31st, 1916, the Morning Journal. Apparently, the Dons had held their holiday meeting at the country club that year, and a graphonola supplied the entertainment. So they were using cutting edge technology for their meetings. Okay, beginning in 1924, so 20 years after the founding of the club, the 10 Dons seem to be featured less frequently in the newspapers. This article is from 1929 and highlights the 25th anniversary of the club's founding. It describes the 10 Dons as one of the oldest clubs now existing in Albuquerque. Rather than showing up on the society page, after the mid-1920s, we begin to find the 10 Dons popping up more often in the 20 years ago columns. But their meetings continued. And they don't lose their focus on social recreation and intellectual development. Here we see some of the highlights of the social recreation activities. These are primarily taking place at the annual dinners to which the wives are invited. In 1914, the Dons met in Harris Canyon for the making of a spoof motion picture. Later in 1914, they apparently played some form of musical chairs, and this was newsworthy. Just imagine these well-known judges, doctors, and professors scuffling for chairs. In 1944, at the 40th anniversary meeting, the Dons recreated the founding of the club by impersonating the founding members. R.F. Asplund even portrayed his younger self. Before we move on to the other aspects of the Dons, their history of the club, I wanted to take a few slides here to show some of the really elaborate preparations that they made for their early meetings. On the left, we see a menu card for the meeting in the first year, and on the right, a memento from January 23rd, 1906. You'll notice on the menu card that the dinner was to be followed by hot air, a reference to the lecture, sure. And on the right, the schedule of hosts and presenters is given on the spokes of the wheel. Both of these items were credited to C.E. Hodgen. Okay, excuse me. We skipped ahead. There we go. Here we have a beautiful booklet that's titled Stories by the 10 Dons, prepared by M.E. Hickey, well, collected by M.E. Hickey in 1926. I have to wonder if his sister didn't help him with the decoration as she did with our original artifact. The document is a typescript compendium of entertaining depictions of the members. As it says, by way of introduction, bits of wisdom, wit, and humor that have fallen, trickled, rippled, or dropped from the lips of the 10 Dons at various diverse and sundry times during the existence of the club. These next two items were programs from two of the different annual dinners. Rather than a lecture, these dinners always included usually included lighthearted toasts by many of the members. And on the right, we can see some of the topics for toasts included the Don as he is, the Don as he thinks he is, the Don as he thinks his wife thinks he is, and the wives of the Dons as the Dons think they are. Probably very amusing meal and entertainment. So now I would like to turn to the wives, to the Donnas, and I'm saying Donna because sometimes it is spelled D-O-N-N-A-S. You may ask, or you may already guessed, what were the wives doing during the regular bi-monthly dinners? Well, they were in the kitchen. Of course, they were either preparing or supervising the preparation of the elaborate meals that the Dons were known for. Fortunately, I suppose they did have these annual dinners and the ladies' nights when the wives were guests and the meetings took on more of a party-like atmosphere. In the early years of the club, there were 3 ladies' nights each year. However, as Earl Moulton notes in his history of the club, these special celebrations became fewer and fewer as the years went on. As an aside, both Earl Moulton and I think it likely that the mid-century wives of the 10 Dons lost their appetite for supporting the club with extravagant monthly dinners to which they were not invited. In 1908, here we have one of the early mentions of the attention paid to the wives of the 10 Dons. This article tells us that a pleasing feature of the winter series were the 3 elaborate dinner parties given at the Alvarado Hotel, complimentary to the wives of the members. Now, this again, you don't have to try to read. I'm going to read it for you. But I had to share this description of one of the annual dinners that appeared in the Morning Journal in 1906. It was said one of the most unique and clever affairs of the season took place at the home of Professor C.E. Hodgen. And now to quote more of the article, the guests were seated at a round table, in the center of which shining goldfish swam lazily in a miniature lake banked with ferns and moss, the whole being about 5 feet in diameter. After the first course, the lights in the dining room suddenly went out, and the lake became a brilliantly illuminated electric fountain. Around a center column of water, a dozen smaller jets rose nearly to the ceiling, in which, at the will of the operator, beautiful colors played, changing from red to blue and gold, 9 different wonderful combinations of colors being possible. This shows the immense effort that the Dons went to for their meetings. It wasn't your usual Wednesday night book club meeting for them. Here we have a program for the Christmastide dinner held at the Alvarado in 1913, wishing a Merry Christmas and Happy New Year to the 10 Dons' wives. Now, the Donnas did have to participate in the extravagant affairs to which they were invited. At this dinner in 1925 at the home of Judge Hickey, each Don and each lady is hereby advised to be prepared to entertain for 5 minutes the other Dons and ladies with wit and humor, or with what to the mind of the individual concerned will pass for wit or humor. And speaking of wit and humor, the 10 Don Din, a parody newsletter, was created for the 1931 evening program honoring the wives. I am wondering today if we might not find the Donna's psalm on the left quite as humorous as they maybe did then. To quote, "The Don is my master, I shall not shirk. He maketh me stay outside while the Dons are present. He leadeth me out beside the sink in the kitchen. He restoreth not my waning strength. He turns me into the paths of the culinary department for his stomach's sake. He maketh me to prepare a table before him in the presence of his cronies. He causeth me to grease his shiny pate with Vaseline. I have overfilled his brimming cup. Surely I should receive great consideration all the days of my life, for I shall leave the house of my Don, no, never." Okay, so there isn't time to introduce the approximately 41 members of the 10 Dons individually to you, but I did want to share some of the later members who might be familiar to our listeners. On the left, we have Reuben Perry, who with 43 years has the distinction of the longest club membership. Mr. Perry was head of the Albuquerque Indian School from 1907 to 1932. In the center, we have Clarence Milton Botts, near and dear to the Special Collections Library. Botts Hall is named for his son. Judge Botts served on the New Mexico Supreme Court, and while he joined the 10 Dons in 1921, we don't have a record of when he left the club. It's possible that he remained a member until his death in 1963. Aldo Leopold on the right was also a member briefly during his time in Albuquerque. And although I can't be sure of the complete membership, we do have some resources here that help determine my approximation. On the right is a list of members that was developed by Earl Moulton for the history that gives us the members and their club membership dates and some other information. And that goes up to 1956 when he produced the history. Then on the left, we have a list from 1961 newspaper article that gives the membership that year. So working with these two documents, I'm approximating that there were 41 members over the course of the life of the club. And again, to thank for him for the published list of membership, we have Earl L Moulton. Mr. Moulton joined the 10 Dons in 1929 and stayed until his death in 1958. In case you're not familiar with Earl Moulton, he came to New Mexico in 1902, in his words, broken in health, in spirit, and financially. He was a sheep herder in the Estancia Valley for some short time before starting his own business. He joined the Charles Ilfeld Company in 1912 as a store manager and eventually worked his way up to chairman of the company. He also served as New Mexico's first representative to the U.S. Chamber of Commerce. The Center for Southwest Research has a nice archive of Earl Moulton's papers, from which much of my information for this talk has been taken. This on the right is the original letter that he received from UNM President F Zimmerman, congratulating him on his election to the club. Earl Moulton would go on to be a very enthusiastic member. And here we see the group in 1940 at the Moulton House. And you can see seated, we have Dr. James F. Zimmerman, then Louis McCrae, we're going left to right, Frank C.W. Pooler, C.M. Botts, James P. Threlkeld, and in the back, standing on the left, we have Walter Connell, Reuben Perry, Hugh Woodward, John Milne, and finally, Earl L. Moulton. Earl Moulton would be given the task to write this 50th anniversary history that's provided so much information for me. He didn't get it done in time for the presentation he was supposed to give, but he did finish it in 1956. It should be noted that he was writing the history of the Rotary Club of Albuquerque at the same time as he was doing the 10 Dons. In this article that I've clipped here, we also learned that Mr. Moulton published a book titled New Mexico's Economic Future that was widely used as a textbook. And I'll come back to that publication shortly. Here we have a photo of the Dons and their wives at the 50th anniversary dinner that was held at the Moulton's home. Okay, now I'd like to take a few minutes to share some of the titles of these very studious papers that were read at 10 Dons meetings. I'd like to start with a quote from the newspaper that appeared on the occasion of the club's 35th anniversary. The headline read, 10 Dons Club is 35 years old. Monthly sessions featured by papers. Members discuss world and state affairs, but keep their deliberations a secret. By unspoken agreement, the 10 Dons put their professional personalities in the closet with their hats when they arrive for dinner. No publicity is given their papers, and remarks informally delivered provide discussion which closes with the evening. Imagine that the club has been in existence for about 63 years. And in the beginning, there were at least 17 papers per year. So we have a lot of different papers that were read at the meetings. I did not find a complete record of the subjects. However, the titles were often in the newspaper articles. So we can have an idea of the talks that were given. And I've listed some for you here. During the tumultuous years of the early 20th century, the topics were often related to current events. In December 1918, we have the part animals played in the Great War. Then the amazingly relevant topic, did the government follow the right course in quarantining for the flu? Unfortunately, we don't know Dr. Hope's conclusion to that, his answer to that question. Then in 1919, we have the influence to be expected from women's suffrage. And finally, on this slide, we have the ominous sounding, what should be done with the Turk for the good of the world by Reuben Perry. Has the World Become One Community was presented by F Zimmerman in 1931. And unfortunately, we know, and I can see from following talks, that the world stayed pretty well divided. In 1939, we have the talk World War II and the part the United States should play in it, presented by Earl Moulton. And here I need to thank Steve Egan for pointing out an error in a previous slide that I had for this. This talk did take place in November 1939, shortly after the outbreak of the war. Okay, so talks about the political divides continue over the years. There's a talk about the communistic influences in US government in March 1949. And another example of the talks that was a bit shocking to me was treason in textbooks, given by John Milne, the superintendent of public schools. Very curious about that one too. Okay, I haven't done an exhaustive search for all the texts of these talks, but I think it's likely that most have been lost to time. The Center for Southwest Research has some of Earl Moulton's in that archive, as well as many that were written by C.E. Hodgin in his archive. This paper for Earl Moulton began titled From Sheepherder to the Director of the Chamber of Commerce of the United States. It began, as many of them did, with a protestation of the difficulty of the topic. He says, the subject assigned to the writer this year was From Sheepherder to the Director of the Chamber of Commerce of the United States. I tried to be excused because of the subject's implications. No one had ever tried an autobiography before. Moreover, justice could not be done to such an assignment in the time usually used for the evening's paper. I couldn't get excused, was tabbed for the job. And then here we have snippets of C.E. Hodgin's handwritten copy for his paper, How Should Air Traffic Be Regulated? That begins similarly. The committee has assigned to me the most difficult of all the subjects evolved this year from their prolific craniums. For this compliment, I feel highly elated and honored, for it means that I am unquestionably regarded by them as the best fitted for and most capable of treating this very elevated subject because of my generally acknowledged mental caliber, my efficient mechanical training, my unsurpassed knowledge of legal complications, and my extensive experience with air traffic. His paper includes another poem entitled Safety First, and I'd like to share that with you because I'm very fond of C.E. Hodgin's poems. Once upon a time, a man to New York went, being bent on worthy business, we'll avow, but he tried to jaywalk corners on too busy, crowded streets, and we're wondering where his soul reposes now. When he reached that intersection, then he saw his awful plight, for in front a Ford dashed at him and a freight truck from the right. Then he shot a glance to leftward and a taxi whizzed up there, while straight at his defenseless back, a tricep cut the air. Hemmed in he was on every side, he looked up in despair, when lo, he saw above his head an airplane falling there. What could he do? His eyes looked down, and there right in the street, a manhole cover stared at him close by his restless feet. Quick as a flash, he jerked the lid off and threw himself into the drain, but dropped on the track of an underground road and was killed by the subway train. Dean Hodgins also gave his thoughts on marriage and divorce in another paper he presented to the 10 Dons. This was in response to the 1858 transfer of divorce authority from ecclesiastical to civil authority and a large increase in divorces that ensued from that. Okay, so we can also learn from looking through the Hodgins archive that lot of the talks did double duty. There were notes on many of the manuscripts of the various settings where his talk was presented. Often for other clubs, as we can see here in the first instance, the talk titled "The Evolution of the Education Legislature" was presented at both the 10 Dons and the Albuquerque Historical Society. Or we have "Are the Olympic Games Worthwhile?" which made it to an Education 101 class after being heard at the 10 Dons. And by the way, since we have the text of this, we can determine his answer to the question was yes, the Olympic Games are worthwhile. Besides these papers being given in multiple venues, they also appeared in print from time to time, occasionally being reprinted in their entirety in the newspaper. I have found several examples of publications in the Earl Moulton archive. For example, this booklet, The Odyssey of a Flockmaster, a story of the 1934 drought in the southwestern United States. The story started out as a letter written to his brother, and it then was reshaped into a paper for the 10 Dons. That paper was titled The 1934 Drought. And Moulton then gives Hugh Woodard credit for the title Odyssey of a Flockmaster for this printed publication. And here we have a paper that Earl Moulton read for the 10 Dons that eventually became this brochure on mileage rationing. Another paper that Earl Moulton presented to the 10 Dons in February 1942, titled "The War and Its Impact on American Business," was subsequently published in the New Mexico Quarterly Review. And now we come back to Earl Moulton's publication on New Mexico's economic future. In December 1944, he presented the paper to the 10 Dons. Then the printed publication appeared the next year. And in addition, his talk that we saw earlier, from sheep herder to the director of the Chamber of Commerce of the United States, was printed and widely distributed by Clinton P. Anderson. Lest we think that Earl Moulton was the only Don publishing his work, here are two examples of papers that were given to the club and then published by Edgar L. Hewitt. Archaeological Resources of New Mexico was a talk given on April 1st, 1946, and later published in El Palacio in the June 17 to 26, 1946 issue. And then Facing the Future of New Mexico from the June 1945 issue of El Palacio was first a talk given to the 10 Dons in February 1943. And finally here, I have some headlines that accompanied articles in the paper, basically reprints of the talks in the newspaper. The first one, "World is Several Centuries Behind, Both Morally and in Spiritual Culture," is claimed, was actually just a 3-column recap of the talk that was given by W.R. Walton, but the other two, the entire talks, were printed in the newspaper. Okay, now we're going to turn from the talks to the food, to the dinners. Briefly, again, they were marvelous, sumptuous meals. In April 1911, the dinner was called "Something of a Culinary Dream." Later that month, the dinner was a culinary delight and thoroughly demonstrative of the fact that a man can best be won through his stomach. And we'll come back to that thought in a minute. You remember that the Dons had potato bread one night. And here we have an article that shows us they had another wheatless dinner in 1938. And there was another meal that they had of bear meat that was noted in the newspaper that had been a gift to the host. And he shared it with his club. And of course, I know all of this because it was covered in the newspaper. It wasn't uncommon, especially in the early years, to see the complete menu given coverage in the paper. So as best as I can tell, the 10 Dons were in existence from 1904 to 1968. They met at least 10 times a year. And in early days, it was 20 meetings per year. And so I contend that the quality of the dinners was the primary contributor to the longevity of the club. It's hard to imagine that a club that required one to present a lengthy scholarly lecture twice a year could motivate members for over 60 years without good food. So that brings us to our +1, the surprise character in our story. I would like to introduce to you here Edith English. Mrs. English was a very popular cateress in Albuquerque for over 50 years. And I believe we can glean from the newspaper articles that she was the primary source of catering for the Tendons. Edith English was born in Santa Fe in 1881. She moved to Albuquerque around 1913 and worked as a cook before starting her own catering business. A story in the Albuquerque Journal in 1976 proclaimed she is part of the Albuquerque story from 1913 on, as surely as any of its business and professional leaders. Coming back to the Party Girl article from 1947, I'd like to share a few quotes about Edith. This article was filled with reminiscences from her career. The author tells us that guests arriving at a party greet their hostess at the front door and often as not find their way to the kitchen where they greet Edith English as their old friend. Edith, catered for many of the big social events in Albuquerque, not just the Tendons. For example, she catered Earl Moulton's 4th wedding anniversary party with a menu for 400. She also recalled the Tendons fondly in this article, noting that when they were in their heyday, so was Albuquerque society in its heyday. In 1961, the Tendons honored Edith English, their caterer for more than 40 years. She was presented with a certificate of appreciation in recognition of her long and continued service to the club. The certificate was signed by C.M. Botts, Louis A. McCrae, Hugh B. Woodward, R. Fred Pettit, W.R. Lovelace II, J.R. Modral, G.L. Doolittle, M.M. Hardin, W.J. Jackal, and Albert K. Mitchell. Edith was 94 years old in this feature article about her from 1976. Again, you're not intended to be able to read this, but I wanted to show the prominence of this tribute that was given to her. I will share some excerpts with you here. Sometimes I had a party in the morning, one in the afternoon, and one at night, says Edith. One time, 2 families wanted me for a wedding on the same day, and one changed the date so I could come serve it. Just imagine how important she was to the social elite in Albuquerque. I knew both of Albert Sims' wives and some of those big parties. Ruth Hannah McCormick Sims never knew what she was going to eat at them until she sat down. She left everything to me. Edith also regularly catered for Presidents Zimmerman and Pope Joy of UNM, as well as Senators Dennis Chavez and Clinton P. Anderson. And then back to the Tendons, she says, they would give papers and dinners at different homes twice a month. I would tell the hostess what others had so we wouldn't have the same. She could also share which particular food some of the members liked or disliked, who didn't eat very much, and who ate a lot. Besides running her catering business, Edith raised a family and in fact also raised 2 of her grandchildren after the death of one of her daughters. Both grandchildren only wanted education, she said, and they both completed master's degrees. Her grandson, John Lewis, was a jazz pianist and became musical director of the famed modern jazz quartet. He also taught for a summer at Harvard University and then in New York City, where Edith's granddaughter, his sister, Marilyn Gore, was dean of students at Cooper Union. When Marilyn married, 80 society matrons of Albuquerque sent a set of sterling silver flatware because they loved her grandmother so much. John also took Edith and Laura, his aunt, on tour with him to England and France. And Edith said, "We were crazy about the food in France, but we almost starved to death in England. They don't know how to cook. Everything's boiled." Edith seems to have quit her business in 1965, and the Tendans gradually disappeared in the next 3 years. I like to think of Edith English as the hero of our story of the Tendans. Without her help, would the wives of the Tendans have put up with it as long as they did? As one was recounted in one of the early lighthearted poems describing the club in 1930, one Donna has said, "It seems very clear that the Dons would not last for a single year, were it not for the good things they have to eat on every occasion whenever they meet." So thank you. I am going to stop sharing my screen here and come back to you. So now if I can take a look and see some of the comments and questions that people have. I'd also like to note that to thank Shauna Morris for discovering our artifact that led me on this search, and other members of the Special Collections Library staff and the Genealogy Center for help with my research, and also, of course, the Center for Southwest Research with their wonderful archives. So starting with the early questions, Janet Sayers has noted that it seems an all Anglo group of men. Did the group become more ethnically, diverse? And as far as I know, the answer to that is no. I think it stayed Anglo. So that that is something that I can't absolutely say, but looking just at the names and the people I've been able to research, I believe that it was Anglo primarily. Oh, the interesting question from Lori Baptiste about a reporter from the Journal attending these meetings. I didn't get the feeling that a reporter was there, and this was asked of me at another presentation also. I think that the society page or the university news kind of took in these stories from people. And so either they contacted the club to ask what was going to be going on, or the club was doing some self-promotion that all of these articles ended up in the newspaper about them. The land that they were trying to purchase, a question about the land that they were trying to purchase. I don't know exactly, I didn't pursue that, but it was on the East Mesa. And now I can't remember exactly what year that was. It was fairly early on, but I didn't pursue that in my research. Kudos to the Dons. What context did they exist for those who are not socialites? So, like what context? I'm not exactly certain what you mean by that. They were they were prominent men from early Albuquerque, and then when one left or died, another would be invited to join. They were primarily in the legal, medical, and education professions, but then we do have a jeweler and others here or there that were invited to join, and university presidents, of course. Interesting. Janet asks if it was also a Protestant group, and that I don't know, and I didn't pursue that to check and see. Thank you. Nice, from Edwin Jones, nice presentation. Janet asks, did they continue meeting during the flu epidemic? That is a super question. And as far as I know, they did. We have talks that came during the flu epidemic. What they did as far as precautions, I didn't see anything said. Okay. Oh, so Janet asks, do I know who gave the collection to the Center for Southwest Research? So they have the Earl Moulton collection that was from his family, and the C.E. Hodgin collection, of course. The 10 Dons collection, I don't recall if that was noted. My impression is that it is a collection of items that were put together by the Center for Southwest Research. I don't think that everything came as a collection. I think it's a created collection of material on the 10 Dons that they may have gotten here or there. They have the same booklet that we have. They have a copy of the 10 Dons Din that we have at Special Collections, but then they have quite a bit more, including some of the papers that were given. Terry Christensen says, now I know who Hodgin Elementary School is named for, probably so. Marina Ramos, the women's club of this era, whether literary, temperance, or suffrage related, were also almost totally Euro-American Anglo organizations, yes. The Mrs. Roth, Asplund, and Stroup were suffragists. Yes, I wasn't sure about all of them, but I did think it was interesting to note that the one had been at least a representative to the, I think it was the American Suffrage Association. And that's Sylvia. Although Leopold was married to Nina Otero Warren's half-sister. I did not know that. That's fascinating. Thank you for that. So Terry Christensen says, interesting, is AAUW part of this statement? Because that was certainly the demographic makeup membership at that time. I'm not sure, I believe. So I'm not sure I understand exactly the question there. And if you'd like to clarify, please do. Janet, are the papers of the talks preserved anywhere or were they secret? So sometimes they appeared in the newspaper, sometimes they were left, and the Center for Southwest Research has them. But as I mentioned, we have so many talks that were given over the 60-some years of this club that they were not all preserved somewhere. And the ones that I can see in the archives actually are often just the notes. Sometimes they're typed, but sometimes they're just notes on a yellow legal pad, and just the handwritten copy of the papers. So that's about as much preservation as we have. Although then some, of course, were okay. Some, of course, were actually published in a different format. And then I see, yes, okay, this clears up the WU came to the suffrage movement late. Yes, so that was regarding the suffrage movement. So Janet asks that about the artifact at Special Collections that got us interested in this club. And really it was cataloged, and in the stacks in the back, I forget how many items are back there. So it has been property of the library since 1964, and it's just been there in the stacks, and you don't know. It was found by research by Shauna because she was looking for things. So the catalog entry for it did mention a club, and it came up when she was searching for Albuquerque clubs, but it was not something that we would necessarily have found otherwise. Okay, so from Sylvia again, thank you for a great picture of the club and the times. In her research, she has found some suffragists espoused eugenics. Did I find any talks on that topic from the Dons? I don't recall that I saw that, but I wouldn't be surprised if there were some. There were some very interesting different titles that I could see. Never saw the content of most of them, but I wouldn't be surprised if there were things. For example, the one about what should we do with the Turk. I don't really know what was meant by that, but it sounds, I mean, why should they have done anything with the Turk? I'm sorry, I don't know for sure about the East Mesa land. So I cannot answer that. I did try to follow up. Actually, I was following up to see how their fundraising went, to see if they were able to make the purchase at that time, and I couldn't find anything in the newspapers. Thank you, Roland. And well, I don't know. Roland wonders if it could have been Roosevelt Park along Cole. I really don't know. I'm sorry, I didn't investigate that as part of this talk that much. So I apologize for not knowing more about that. I'll wait a moment and see if there are any other questions. And if not, I thank you very much for listening to me for an hour. I've enjoyed this, and I look forward to digging into a different topic. I hope you all enjoy the rest of your Sunday and holiday tomorrow. And I guess that's probably it for the questions. Thank you very much, everyone. Yes, Trudy Merriman points out that attitudes were changing so radically by 1968. And I really think that has a lot to do with it, as I supposed. And Earl Moulton also commented, even in the 50s, the wives were much less interested in supporting the club. And then people had so many other things to keep them busy that preparing these lectures twice a year was probably quite an ordeal too. Okay, thank you. Oops. Yes, Joe Sabatini points out that after World War I, there was a war between Greece and Turkey, and I'm sure that's what it was in reference to. And I guess we would say the same things about other conflicts. What do we do with the thing, the vanquished? Okay, thank you all.